find yourself another place. This table is for family, not for the adopted. My sister Jessica's voice cut through the hum of the elegant dining room at Oakwood, one of Boston's most prestigious restaurants. They all found it amusing. My parents, my brother Michael, and Jessica's husband, they all burst into laughter as if it were the cleverest joke in the world. I stood frozen, clutching my purse as a blush of humiliation spread across my cheeks under the curious gazes of other diners. The crystal chandeliers overhead cast a warm glow on the pristine white tablecloths and sparkling glasses, but for me, in that moment, the whole world turned to ice. My name is Nicole, and I'm 25. I've spent 21 years of my life in this house since they took me in as a 4-year-old. And every one of those 21 years, I was made to understand that I wasn't one of them, that I would always be an outsider, a step below. The only person who saw me as an individual was Grandma Eleanor, my adoptive father's mother. Now she sat at the head of the table, her face an unreadable mask. "Jessica, please, stop," I said, almost in a whisper, desperately clinging to the last remnants of my composure. "Oh, don't take everything so personally," my adoptive mother, Barbara, interjected, waving a perfectly manicured hand with a hint of irritation. "It's just a joke. You know Jessica's personality." I knew Jessica's personality all too well. At 30, she had mastered the art of bullying me in a way that looked like innocent family banter to outsiders. Since childhood, she'd had the largest room, the most fashionable clothes, and a paid-for education at a prestigious university. I got her hand-me-downs and went to a local college. She was praised for the smallest successes, while I was scolded for trying to reach too high. "Sit down, Nicole," my father, Richard, said authoritatively. "Don't create a scene." I silently sank into a chair, swallowing the lump of objections that rose in my throat. We were gathered here to celebrate another of Jessica's achievements, the launch of her own clothing boutique, which, of course, was sponsored by our parents. They always supported her. When I had asked them for a small loan 3 years ago to open my small handmade ceramics shop, they had just laughed and advised me to come back down to earth. The dinner continued, but the conversation flowed around me as if I weren't at the table. Jessica talked enthusiastically about her new Lexus. Michael shared details of his promotion at the law firm. My parents, Richard and Barbara, beamed with pride, showering them with questions and compliments. At one point, I tried to mention my own success. I had just secured a $45,000 contract, a huge step for my business. But before I could finish my sentence, my mother cut me off. "That's very nice, dear," she said, not even looking in my direction. "Michael, so what about your annual bonus?" When dessert arrived, the buzz of my family's voices turned into white noise for me. I just sat there, mentally detached from their world of boasting and self-satisfaction. Suddenly, the silence in my head was broken by the waiter. He confidently approached my father, holding the bill, but Richard, without even glancing at it, lazily waved his hand in my direction. "My daughter, Nicole, is covering the bill tonight." Those words pulled me out of my stupor. I looked up at him, unable to believe my ears. The waiter, flustered, placed the black leather folder in front of me. "What's going on?" My voice sounded weak, and I hated it. Jessica let out a quiet, venomous laugh. "This is your chance to finally thank the family. We've invested so much in you, it's time you started paying your debts." "Debts?" A chill ran through me. "Of course," Barbara chimed in, fixing me with an icy stare. "Or did you think the food, clothes, and roof over your head all these years appeared out of thin air? We gave you a life, Nicole. Paying for one dinner isn't such a high price." My fingers went numb as I opened the folder. The number at the bottom wasn't just big, it was surreal, $4,200. And I realized it had all been planned, the most expensive champagne, the lobsters that no one finished, and Michael's 2 desserts. This wasn't a dinner. It was a cruel performance. "I don't have that kind of money," I whispered, and it sounded like a death sentence. Oh, you'll manage, Jessica cooed with a sickeningly sweet smile. We all heard about your huge success. What was it? A $45,000 contract? I'm sure for a business lady like you, that's just pocket change. A bitter lump formed in my throat. She knew the truth. That $45,000 wasn't a lottery win, it was the result of sleepless nights. It was my budget for the next 6 months, most of which was already mentally allocated, for the rent on my tiny office, for professional software, and to pay off the student loan they, of course, hadn't helped me with. This dinner didn't just hurt my wallet, it set me back months, shattering all my plans. But I looked at their expectant faces and knew I had no choice. Any protest would be seen as a tantrum. Any objection would turn me into the ungrateful and eternally dissatisfied one. Every movement felt heavy and slow. I took my credit card out of my wallet. Placing it in the folder, I felt something inside me break. When the waiter took the bill, I forced myself to take a sip of water and put on a calm smile, as if this were just a normal evening with a loving family. Jessica was already busy discussing their upcoming trip to Hawaii, and my parents were enthusiastically planning to join her. I, as usual, was not part of the equation. When the waiter returned with the terminal and the receipt, I tapped my card, feeling my fingers disobey me. $4,200, that was the price for the privilege of sitting at the same table with the people who were supposed to be my family. Well, it was a lovely evening, Barbara said, daintily dabbing the corners of her mouth with a napkin. I hope we can do this again next month. Next month. My ears started ringing. They wanted to turn this into a tradition. I opened my mouth, ready to unleash everything boiling inside, to say that I had had enough, but another voice beat me to it. Wait. The voice was quiet, but it silenced everyone. Grandma Eleanor, who hadn't uttered a word all dinner, slowly rose from her seat. At 75, she didn't try to be glamorous. Her gray hair was simply pulled back in a modest bun, and a plain cashmere shawl was draped over her shoulders. But there was something in her gaze, sharp, clear, and absolutely fearless, that silenced not just our table, but seemingly the entire restaurant. Something inside me stirred. For the first time all evening, I felt not fear, but hope. Grandma Eleanor had never been like the others. When my parents, brother, and sister saw me only as a burden, she was the only one who came to my school concerts, who always remembered my birthday, and who wasn't afraid to ask what I dreamed of. She was the wealthiest person I knew, a self-made billionaire who had built her business empire on real estate deals. But in recent years, she had become different, quiet, distant. At family dinners, she would silently watch everyone with such intense focus that I often wondered what thoughts were hidden behind her calm face. Mother, is something wrong? Richard, my father, asked with a note of impatience in his voice. We were just about to leave. Sit down, Eleanor's voice wasn't loud, but there was such a steel note in it that even my father didn't dare to argue and immediately sank back into his chair. I have something to say. And you will all listen. Jessica theatrically rolled her eyes but stayed put. Michael continued to stare at his phone under the table. My parents exchanged a look of complete bewilderment. Grandma swept her long, heavy gaze over all of them before it settled on me. Something flashed in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, deep sadness and, it seemed, bitter disappointment in all of them. For years, I have silently watched this family, Eleanor began. Her voice was calm, but there was ice in it. I have seen how you treat Nicole. I have always seen it. Mother, are you serious right now? Barbara tried to interrupt. I don't think we should. Be silent. The word was so sharp that Barbara stopped mid-sentence and fell silent in astonishment. I am 75, Grandma continued, and for the past few months, I have been thinking a lot about my legacy. About whose hands everything I've built will pass into when I'm gone. A dead silence fell over the table. My father dropped his fork so abruptly that it clattered against his plate. The smug expression slowly slid off Jessica's face. You all know how things stand with my current will, Eleanor said evenly. The bulk of my fortune goes to my son, Richard, and after him, it is divided among my grandchildren. I saw a glint of greed flash in Jessica's eyes. She had been living for years in anticipation of this money, mentally spending a fortune that wasn't yet hers. But recently, I asked my lawyer to prepare a new document. Grandma slowly took a thick envelope from her handbag. It was signed and notarized yesterday. The silence became almost suffocating. You can't do this. Michael blurted out, finally looking up from his phone. Change the will? Because of some stupid dinner joke? A joke? Eleanor let out a short, bitter laugh. For 20 years, I've watched you systematically break this person. How you made her invisible in her own home, belittled her achievements, treated her as if her feelings meant nothing. And tonight, you orchestrate this circus, forcing her to pay for your greed, and you call it fun? We were just having a little fun, Jessica tried to protest, but her voice trembled betrayingly. Fun? Grandma said the word as if it were something disgusting. You call cruelty fun? Since when did causing pain become entertainment for you? My heart was beating so loudly it seemed to echo in the ringing silence. Slowly, without taking her eyes off the family, Eleanor walked around the table and stood directly behind my chair. Her warm, dry hand rested on my shoulder. Nicole is the only person at this table who possesses true character, she said firmly. She has achieved everything on her own. Built her business from scratch without ever asking for help. She has maintained her kindness and resilience despite all your attempts to destroy her. Mother, you're exaggerating, Richard interjected, but his voice sounded uncertain. Am I? Eleanor's eyebrows rose. Barbara, answer me, when was the last time you called Nicole just to ask how she was doing? Not as a formality, but genuinely. My mother helplessly opened and closed her mouth. Michael, what about you? Have you ever been genuinely happy for her successes? Told your sister you were proud of her? My brother stared silently at his plate. Jessica. Has there ever been a single day when you saw Nicole as your equal, rather than as a servant or a backdrop for your triumphs? A flush of anger and shame spread across my sister's face. Eleanor swept her gaze over all of them, a gaze filled with nothing but cold, steel-like disappointment. You have all failed spectacularly. You took in a little girl who had lost everything, and instead of surrounding her with love, you made her pay for 21 years for a kindness you were never able to give. Grandma's words hung in the deafening silence. The other diners in the restaurant were no longer hiding the fact that they were listening, and the waiters stood frozen against the walls, watching the drama unfold. Therefore, I have made a decision, Eleanor said calmly, her voice gaining strength with each word. Everything I have created, every asset, every dollar, every share, will go to Nicole. The effect was like an explosion. What? Jessica shrieked, jumping to her feet. You have no right. That's not fair. Michael slammed his fist on the table. Grandma, do you even realize what you're saying? Please, Mother, don't. Barbara pleaded. We're talking about billions. Nicole isn't even our blood. Enough, Eleanor commanded, and they fell silent again. Nicole has shown more family qualities than all of you combined. She has earned this not by right of blood, but by the strength of her character. By being a better person than any of you could ever hope to be. I sat, stunned into silence, unable to process what I had heard. Billions. Grandma's entire empire. It seemed impossible, unreal, like a scene from someone else's life. She's manipulating you, Richard blurted out desperately. Nicole must have done something. Nicole has done nothing but survive, despite your treatment, Eleanor cut him off. And today, that ends. She took out her phone and dialed a number. David, it's Eleanor. Yes. Proceed with the new will. Immediately. Prepare all the documents to transfer the assets into a trust fund in Nicole's name. My family's faces turned into masks of fury, horror, and disbelief. Jessica looked as if she was about to faint. Michael turned crimson with rage. My parents seemed to have aged 10 years in a single minute. This isn't over, Jessica hissed at me across the table. We'll sue. You won't get anything from us. Try, Eleanor answered calmly, ending the call. I've made sure everything is legally impeccable. And my medical report from this morning confirms that I am of perfectly sound mind and memory. She had thought of everything. The chaos that followed was unlike anything I had ever seen. Jessica, her face contorted with indignation, tried to lunge across the table. Michael grabbed her arm, but he himself was struggling to maintain his composure. My parents sat in a stupor, watching their perfect world crumble before their eyes. You set this all up, you little schemer. Jessica snarled at me. Playing the victim all this time. Enough, Eleanor stepped between us, shielding me. Nicole did nothing. Until this moment, she had no idea about my plans. And it was true. I was still in a state of shock. My mind refused to accept what had happened. Billions of dollars. Everything Grandma had built her entire life. Why are you doing this? My father, Richard's, voice trembled. I'm your son. Your blood. And you should be ashamed of what you've become, Eleanor replied, her voice softening but losing none of its firmness. I gave you everything, Richard. The best education, every opportunity, all my love. And you failed to learn the most important thing, compassion. Instead, you passed on your callousness and cruelty to your own children. Richard changed tactics. Mother, let's discuss this rationally. We can find a solution. Split the inheritance. There is nothing to discuss, Eleanor cut him off. The decision is final. My lawyers are already handling it. The trust is established. Nicole will receive everything upon my death, and she will gain access to the first accounts tomorrow. Tomorrow? The word sounded like a gunshot. This wasn't some vague promise. It was happening here and now. Michael leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. You're making a huge mistake. Nicole has no idea what to do with that kind of money. She'll blow it all in a year. Michael's threat hung in the air, but I barely heard it. Everything felt like a surreal dream. I looked at my grandmother, my only anchor in this crumbling world, and finally managed to speak, though only in a whisper, Grandma. I can't. This isn't right. Her gaze, which had been steel-cold, softened instantly as she looked at me. Don't worry about the money, my child, she said quietly, ignoring the others. You will handle it better than any of them. You had to learn to be strong and responsible because you had no other choice. She paused and added, answering the unspoken question in my eyes, you're probably wondering why I was silent for so many years. I just nodded, unable to speak. 3 months ago, my doctors told me to get my affairs in order. It turns out I don't have much time left, she said without a trace of self-pity. That news made everything clear. It showed me that I could no longer afford the luxury of being silent and just watching. The meaning of her words didn't sink in at first, but when it did, the ground fell out from under me. Not the inheritance, not the money, not the scandal. The only thing that mattered was that the only person I loved was leaving. The tears I had held back for so long finally streamed down my face. Eleanor pulled me close. Shoo. Today, we are not mourning the future, Nicole. We are correcting the past. But this is the family fortune. Barbara cried out, grasping at the last straw. Exactly. Eleanor's voice regained its steel. My legacy is honesty, perseverance, and compassion. Qualities I see only in Nicole. As for your threats. She shifted her gaze to Jessica, whose face was twisted in impotent rage. You can try to sue. My lawyer is eagerly awaiting your call. He will be delighted to provide the judge with months of documented evidence of your behavior, as well as the opinions of 3 different doctors regarding my complete mental soundness. I have thought of everything. This game is over. Everything had been thought out. Every step, every word. She had been building a fortress for me while her own time was running out. Suddenly, the restaurant walls, the hum of voices, and the hateful stares became unbearable. My only wish was to be somewhere far away. Eleanor, as if reading my thoughts, squeezed my hand. Let's get out of here, she said firmly. As we moved toward the exit, Michael stepped forward, blocking our path. His face was inches from mine. You'll never be one of us, he hissed. Take your hands off her. Eleanor's voice was quiet, but there was such a chill in it that Michael recoiled. Now. He stepped back. We walked through the silent room under the scrutiny of dozens of curious eyes. The cool Boston evening air felt like a salvation, the first breath of freedom after years in a stuffy cage. An elegant black car was waiting at the curb. An elderly driver with gray hair and a calm face opened the door for us. Miss Nicole, I've been waiting for you, he said with a respectful bow. Arthur has been with me every step of the way, Eleanor explained as we settled into the soft leather seats. He knows everything. The car pulled away smoothly, carrying us away. In the rear window, I could see 3 figures standing on the illuminated sidewalk, my former family. Jessica was shouting something, waving her arms. Michael was frantically talking on his phone. And my parents just stood there, looking lost and infinitely small. I expected to feel fear, guilt, or gloating. But inside, there was only a deafening silence, an emptiness, and a strange, fragile sense of relief. In that silence, the only thing that mattered was the person beside me. Grandma. My voice was barely audible. What you said, is it true? She looked at me, and in the dim light of the car, her eyes seemed clear and calm. Yes, it's true. Her grip on my hand was surprisingly strong, her skin as thin as parchment. But I'm not afraid, Nicole. I have lived a long and, I dare say, good life. I have built something I am proud of. Now my only duty is to ensure that the fruits of my labor fall into capable hands. But I can't do it, I confessed, my voice full of panic. All my life, I've just been trying to stay afloat. I know nothing about managing huge companies, about all of this. You will learn, because you have always learned, she answered confidently. You learned to be strong when no one supported you. You learned to build your own business when no one believed in you. Consider this just the next step. Besides, you won't be alone. I've made sure you have the best team by your side. We drove through the lights of the night city, heading toward her elegant mansion in Back Bay. The silence in the car was no longer oppressive. It was filled with quiet anticipation. What happens now? I asked as we stopped in front of the tall, red brick building. Now? Eleanor squeezed my hand reassuringly. Now we begin to prepare you for a new chapter. And we will do everything to ensure that your so-called family can never hurt you again. The next morning, I woke to bright sunlight streaming through a tall window. For a moment, tangled in the heavy silk sheets and staring at the unfamiliar molded ceiling, I couldn't figure out where I was. Then, all of yesterday's events crashed down on me like an avalanche. The humiliation at the restaurant, Grandma's stunning announcement, her terrible secret, and the quiet ride to this house. It was all real. My old life was over. When I finally dared to turn on my phone, it literally trembled in my hand from the storm of notifications. Dozens of missed calls from Jessica, Michael, and my parents. Their messages were like a panic attack put into text, desperate pleas alternated with poorly veiled threats, and attempts at manipulation turned into accusations. You have to think about the family. This is selfish. Barbara wrote. Our lawyer will be in touch. You'll regret this, Jessica hissed in a message. We can fix this. Just talk to us, Richard tried to reason. She's not in her right mind. Help us prove it before it's too late, that was Michael. I scrolled through them, feeling nothing but a cold detachment, as if reading about someone else's drama. Putting the phone aside, I walked to the enormous window. Below it lay a flawless garden, and beyond that, the morning sun sparkled on the waters of the Charles River. Boats, like white petals, glided across the water. And all of this would soon be mine. The thought made my head spin. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my reverie. Miss Nicole, breakfast is served. Miss Eleanor is waiting for you in her study when you're ready. Grandma's study was the heart of her empire, dark wood-paneled walls, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a massive antique desk. Eleanor herself sat at the head of the table and, despite yesterday's revelations, looked composed and full of energy. Her faithful Arthur stood beside her, and an elegant man in an impeccable suit with kind but very attentive eyes sat opposite. Nicole, come in, Grandma said. Allow me to introduce you to Mr. Fletcher. He has been my lawyer and confidant for many years. We have a few important details to discuss. Mr. Fletcher stood up and gave my hand a warm, firm shake. Miss Nicole, it's an honor to meet you. Your grandmother has always spoken of you with incredible warmth. I sank into a chair, feeling like a guest in someone else's life. The lawyer opened a massive leather briefcase and began to speak. His voice was calm and measured, but the words he spoke seemed like fantasy to me. He talked about trust funds, holding companies, diversified portfolios. Figures with 9 zeros floated past, not registering in my mind: billions in commercial real estate, shares in the country's largest development projects, venture investments in tech startups. And the accounts for immediate access will be activated today, I heard through the fog. $3 million for your personal needs while the legal formalities are completed. Miss Eleanor wanted you to feel secure from day one. $3 million. Immediately. My breath caught in my throat. But this is just the beginning, Eleanor interjected, her gaze sharper than ever. Your family won't let this go. They will scream incompetence, that you influenced me, anything. We must be ready for it. What can they actually do? I asked, my voice sounding foreign. Mr. Fletcher leaned forward. From a legal standpoint, almost nothing. The will is impeccably drafted, and medical reports from 3 independent specialists confirm your grandmother's full capacity. But they can make your life very difficult, drag out the process for years, involve the press, try to tarnish your reputation. Let them try, Eleanor said firmly. I've been keeping records for years. Every holiday Nicole wasn't invited to. Every time she was denied help while Jessica was getting a new car. Every humiliating comment. If they want to take this to a courtroom, I will gladly provide the court with a chronicle of their injustices. At that moment, my phone buzzed on the table again. Jessica. Without thinking, I picked it up and turned it off. For the first time in years, I felt I had the right to do so. There's something else you need to know, Eleanor said, and her tone sent a chill down my spine. Your adoption was not what you think it was. The room swayed for a moment. What do you mean? She took a thin folder from a drawer and pushed it toward me. When Richard and Barbara adopted you, they gained access to a fund. $520,000. That money was meant for you, for your upbringing and education. I stared at her, stunned, unable to believe it. They got money for me? Money from a trust your biological parents created, Eleanor confirmed. Your parents were lost in an accident when you were 4. They made sure you would have everything. Richard and Barbara became your guardians and the administrators of those funds. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Bank statements, transfers, checks. $520,000. And I had been wearing Jessica's hand-me-downs and taking out loans for college. I flipped through page after page. Expensive vacations. New cars. Private school for Jessica. A university fund for Michael. They had spent my money. On everyone but me. They took it all, I whispered. Yes, Eleanor said quietly. I found out about this 2 years ago and have been gathering evidence ever since. It was theft, Nicole. They robbed the child they promised to protect. That realization was sharper than any other hurt. It wasn't just indifference. They had used my money to spoil their own children while I felt like an outsider. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I needed irrefutable proof. And I knew, she paused for a moment, that once you learned the truth, there would be no going back. Your relationship, whatever it was, would be over forever. She was right. In that moment, the last drop of hope vanished. The thought that maybe I had been too ungrateful disappeared. They weren't just bad people. They were criminals. I looked up at her, feeling completely lost. So what do I do now? Leave it to me, Grandma Eleanor said, her voice calm but with a steely edge. Mr. Fletcher has already initiated a lawsuit against Richard and Barbara. It concerns the misappropriation of your trust. With interest over 21 years, they owe you, approximately $1.8 million. The sum hung in the air, deafening me. As I tried to process it, my phone on the table vibrated. The name, Dad, lit up the screen. Answer it, Eleanor said softly but insistently. Put it on speaker. Let's hear what he has to say. With trembling fingers, I swiped the green icon. Nicole, Richard's desperate voice came through the speaker. Nicole, I'm begging you, we need to talk. Your grandmother, she's making things up. I took a deep breath, trying to still my shaking. On the contrary, Richard. I think her mind is perfectly clear, I replied. My own voice sounded surprisingly steady, as if it belonged to someone else. This is pure madness. You can't seriously believe you deserve all that money. You lived with us for so many years, and now you're ready to throw us out on the street for money? His words struck a nerve. For money? I repeated, feeling a cold fury begin to boil inside me. You mean the $520,000 you received for my adoption? The money you spent on everyone but me? Silence on the other end. Then he muttered, I don't know what fairy tales she's been telling you. Bank statements are not fairy tales, Dad, I said. Mr. Fletcher has every transaction. You didn't just take it. You robbed me. Both of you. Suddenly, Barbara's voice, shrill with panic, came through the phone. That money was for your upbringing. For the house, for food. I had to wear Jessica's hand-me-downs and pay for college myself, I retorted, memories flooding back. And meanwhile, she was getting designer clothes, and you bought Michael a new car for his 17th birthday. I got nothing. You are so ungrateful, Richard interjected again. We gave you a home. That was the last straw. You didn't give me a home, you gave me a golden cage, I burst out. Saying those words aloud brought a strange, intoxicating feeling of liberation. You made me feel like a stranger every single day of my life while you spent the money that was meant for me. We will fight this. Barbara threatened. We'll sue you. Please do, Grandma Eleanor chimed in, a note of icy amusement in her voice. I would love to watch you explain the financial records to a judge. Tell him how you spent a 4-year-old girl's money on luxury vacations. The call ended so abruptly that the silence was deafening. I felt Mr. Fletcher's warm hand on my shoulder. Miss Nicole, I understand how overwhelming this all is, but you must know, the law is entirely on your side. They don't have a leg to stand on. They'll still try, I whispered, still looking at the silent phone. Of course, they'll try, Grandma Eleanor confirmed. But they will lose. And when they do, you will never have to see them again. A few days later, the story hit the press, and I suspected Jessica was behind the leak. Headlines screamed about a millionaire disinheriting her family for an adopted granddaughter. To escape the reporters, I moved into Eleanor's estate. Public reaction was mixed. Online, I was called everything from a calculating gold digger to a worthy heiress. Reading the comments, I couldn't help but wonder if I had any right to accept such an inheritance. Eleanor, who was looking increasingly frail from her illness, found me reading these articles. She advised me to ignore public opinion, telling me how she herself was called too ambitious as a woman in business in her youth, but she proved everyone wrong with her actions, not her words. And so will you, she said, weakly squeezing my hand. Soon, Mr. Fletcher brought bad news. Barbara and Richard had officially contested the will. They claimed Eleanor was incompetent and that I was a manipulator who had taken advantage of her condition. Reading these false accusations, I struggled to control my emotions. We have a strong response to their claims, Mr. Fletcher assured me, trying to sound confident. Testimonies from doctors, friends, Eleanor's business partners. All of it confirms her sound mind. They are grasping at straws. But something in his eyes made me wary. There's something else, isn't there? I asked, feeling a growing sense of dread. He exchanged a look with Grandma Eleanor, and she gave a barely perceptible nod. Jessica has hired a private investigator, he finally said. They are trying to find dirt on you, looking for any little thing they can use in court. A chill went through me. But there's nothing to find. We know that, Eleanor said gently. But they won't stop. They will twist the facts, turn everything upside down to make you look bad. As if on cue, my phone rang. An unknown number. Against all logic, I answered. Nicole, I'm so glad I could reach you, said an unfamiliar, sickly sweet female voice. My name is Sarah Baker, from the Boston Chronicle. I'd like to ask a few questions about your relationship with Eleanor. I'm not giving any comments, I said curtly, ready to end the call. Wait, I'm interested in some rumors about your business. I froze. What rumors? Well, there are questions about your startup capital. Some sources suggest that Eleanor was secretly funding you from the beginning. And that your current success is part of a long-term plan. That is an absolute lie. I founded my business with loan money. Can you provide documents to prove that? She pressed. I silently hung up, my hand trembling slightly. This is how they operate, Mr. Fletcher said grimly. They are trying to create the impression that you were grooming Eleanor for years. That all your personal achievements were actually bought with her money. But that's not true. I have all the loan agreements, all the records. We know, dear, Eleanor said soothingly. And we can prove it. But you have to be ready. Just be prepared for the pressure. It will get worse before we win. Eleanor was right. By evening, social media was filled with false information about me. Anonymous accounts, likely run by my former family, spread the most incredible fabrications about my education, my business. The most painful were the speculations about my biological parents, even though I was just a small child then. When a staff member informed me that a crowd of journalists had gathered at the gates, I went to the window. The street was filled with members of the press. I realized their goal was to unnerve me, to make me make a public mistake. They want me to show weakness, I said quietly. Then don't give them the satisfaction, Eleanor replied. She looked tired, but her gaze was still full of determination. We will get through this with truth and dignity. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I replayed moments from the past in my head, Barbara telling me I should be more grateful, Jessica and Michael emphasizing that I wasn't their equal. I realized that the current wave of negativity was just a continuation of the cold treatment I had faced my entire life. Late at night, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number read, "You'll regret this. We won't let this go." It was Jessica. Without hesitation, I took a screenshot and sent it to Mr. Fletcher. Eleanor had taught me the importance of evidence. The morning brought an unexpected development. Michael had somehow convinced security to let him into the house. I found him in the hall, arguing with a staff member. He looked strange, wrinkled clothes, dark circles under his eyes, the complete opposite of the confident man I knew. "Nicole, please," he said when he saw me. "We need to fix this. The family is falling apart." "The family was destroyed a long time ago, Michael," I answered calmly. "It's just that now, with money on the line, you've finally noticed. That's not fair. I know we weren't perfect to you, but to completely cut us out. That's too much. Too much." I felt a slow burn inside me. Do you remember breaking my school project that I worked on for a month, and then watching silently as I was punished for it? How Jessica found my diary and read passages to her friends to laugh at me. How Barbara constantly told me, "Why can't you be more like Jessica?" And Richard said I shouldn't even bother applying to a good university because it's not for people like you. And to top it all off, you spent $520,000 from my trust fund while I was working 3 jobs to pay for college. His face turned pale. "I didn't know about that money. Honestly." "You didn't know because you didn't care," the words poured out, releasing years of pent-up pain. "None of you cared about my life. You never asked how I was. So don't talk to me about family. There never was one. Nicole, please. Leave." My voice was steady and cold. "Get out of this house." "You're making a mistake," he said, but his voice lacked its former confidence. "When Eleanor is gone, you'll be all alone." "I was always alone," I replied quietly. "But now, at least I'll have a chance to build my own life." A staff member escorted Michael to the door. I watched from the window as my stepbrother, hunched over, walked to his car. For one brief moment, I felt a pang of sadness, not guilt, but sorrow for what our family could have been if they had made different choices long ago. That same day, Mr. Fletcher called us for an urgent meeting. From his serious expression, I knew the news was bad. "Jessica's lawyers have found a new angle," he said. "They are claiming you falsified business documents to make yourself seem more successful than you are. Their goal is to prove you're capable of deceit, which means you could have influenced Eleanor as well." "But that's complete nonsense," I argued. "All my documents are in perfect order." "We will prove that. But they're using this as a delay tactic to postpone the main hearing on the will." Suddenly, Eleanor's palm slammed down on the table. Despite her weakness, she was filled with rage. "That will not happen. Mr. Fletcher, file a countermotion. I want this case closed before." She didn't finish the sentence, but we all understood. "Eleanor, you need to rest," the lawyer began gently. "I will rest when justice is served," she retorted. "My granddaughter is being attacked by people who only pretend to be family. We must put an end to this." Mr. Fletcher nodded and, taking out his phone, stepped aside. Eleanor turned to me, her eyes burning with determination. "Nicole, I want to ask you for something." "I'll do anything you say." "Tomorrow, I'm holding a press conference. I will tell everyone the truth, about the money, about the years of mistreatment, about everything. But you must be by my side. People need to see you and hear your story from your own lips." A cold fear gripped me. "I can't. I'm afraid I'll mess it up, say the wrong thing." "You will be magnificent," she said firmly. "Because you will be speaking the truth. That is all that is required of you." I barely slept that night. I tried over and over to find the right words, but everything felt empty and insignificant. How could I condense 21 years of injustice into a few minutes? And how could I make complete strangers believe me? The press conference was held in the city's business center. When we arrived, a sea of cameras and reporters surged at the entrance. Looking at Eleanor, I could see what an incredible effort this was for her. She was willing to do anything to protect me. In the crowded room, under the glare of the lights, Eleanor took the floor. Her voice was surprisingly steady. She calmly and methodically laid out the facts. She spoke of the trust fund money, the years of mistreatment, and provided documents confirming her full mental capacity. She explained that the real manipulators were her relatives, who had made a 4-year-old child a target for their own failings. In the end, she emphasized that despite all the difficulties, I had managed to build my own life and maintain my kindness, a quality they had always lacked. Then she turned to me, and all eyes shifted in my direction. My throat was dry, but I forced myself to speak. I never asked for this attention, I began, my voice gradually growing stronger. I didn't need wealth or fame. I just wanted a family that would love me. A place where I belonged. Parents who would be happy for my successes, not devalue them. That's all I ever wanted. I gathered my courage and looked directly into the cameras. Many people think I had ulterior motives, but until recently, I knew nothing about the inheritance or the trust fund money. I only knew that once again, I was expected to silently endure insults from my family. I held back the tears that were welling up. My grandmother believes in me, and I intend to justify her trust by helping people and refusing to sink to their level. After my words, the room erupted with questions, but Mr. Fletcher calmly cut off all attempts, while Eleanor held my hand reassuringly under the table. Just as we were about to leave, Jessica burst into the room. She looked disheveled and was screaming that it was all a lie, that the real victim here was her. The cameras instantly swiveled in her direction, capturing every moment of her breakdown. One reporter shouted a question about the money from my trust fund. In a rage, Jessica blurted out, "That money was ours. We deserved it for putting up with that ungrateful girl." Her words hung in a stunned silence, broken by another reporter. "So you believe $520,000 is fair compensation for mistreating a child?" Jessica faltered, realizing her mistake too late. Her angry confession had been filmed from every angle. As security escorted her from the room, journalists were already typing furiously on their phones. The story had a new villain, and it wasn't me. Eleanor squeezed my hand. "Well," she whispered. "We couldn't have written a better ending ourselves." And despite the horror of the situation, I felt a smile creep onto my lips. Jessica had just made a fatal mistake in front of the entire world. The video of Jessica's meltdown went viral within hours. Public opinion, once divided, was now firmly on my side. People expressed their support for me, and legal experts unanimously stated that Jessica's thoughtless words had destroyed her family's chances in court. Watching this from Eleanor's study, I still couldn't believe what had happened. Mr. Fletcher, sitting opposite me, looked very pleased. "Their position in court is now extremely weak," he reported. "Jessica's admission that they deserved the trust money essentially confirms our case. Their lawsuit is falling apart." "What happens now?" I asked. "Their lawyers will try to salvage the situation, but it's too late. Furthermore," he added, "the district attorney's office has taken an interest in us. They are considering filing criminal charges against Barbara and Richard." Criminal charges. The thought haunted me. The people who had raised me could end up in prison. At that moment, Eleanor slowly entered the study, leaning on an assistant's arm. The press conference had taken a lot out of her, but her gaze remained clear. "Don't worry so much," she said, noticing my distress. "They chose this path themselves, and now they have to answer for their actions." "But they were still my parents," I said quietly. "They never were," Eleanor answered firmly. "Parents love and protect their children. What Barbara and Richard did was a display of indifference, not care." On a gray Boston morning, the courthouse was under siege. We were surrounded by reporters and onlookers, so Mr. Fletcher led us through a separate entrance. Eleanor looked very frail, and I supported her by the arm as we entered the courtroom. My former family was already there. Barbara feigned composure, Richard looked defeated, Michael avoided my gaze, and Jessica stared at me with cold malice. When Judge Bradley entered, their lawyer, Mr. Davis, began speaking about how Eleanor had supposedly been influenced and her mind was clouded. Then, Mr. Fletcher took the floor. He didn't argue, he simply stated the facts, the financial records from the trust, the doctor's reports on Eleanor's sound mind, and, as a final argument, the video of Jessica's confession. Your Honor, he concluded, this isn't about influence, it's about consequences. Eleanor simply chose to reward the one who deserves it. Barbara's lawyer tried to object, but the judge cut him off. I have seen enough, she said firmly. The evidence is irrefutable. Eleanor was of sound mind when she made her will. The facts of mistreatment of her granddaughter are confirmed, and Jessica's admission that the family deserved the money only confirms the misuse of funds. My heart pounded. Moreover, Judge Bradley continued, the disgraceful behavior the family has exhibited in recent weeks only reinforces the correctness of the decision. Loving relatives would never have acted this way. Jessica jumped to her feet, but the judge's icy glare forced her to sit back down. I rule in favor of the current version of the will, Judge Bradley announced. The lawsuit is dismissed. Furthermore, I order Barbara and Richard to pay restitution for the misuse of the trust funds, $520,000, plus interest for 21 years, which amounts to approximately $1.8 million. Panic erupted on the other side of the room. Barbara burst into tears, Richard looked completely crushed, and Jessica had to be escorted out by bailiffs after her outburst. I sat motionless, unable to believe it was over. We had won. Eleanor squeezed my hand. It's over, dear. You're free. On our way out of the courthouse, we were swarmed by reporters, but Mr. Fletcher and security formed a human corridor for us. I didn't answer any questions, just helped Eleanor into the car, and we drove away. Back at the estate, Eleanor looked peaceful. Now my soul is at rest, she said. My dear Nicole, she touched my face with her thin hand. I have seen justice prevail, and I know my legacy is in good hands. This is more than many are given to experience. The first thing I did was establish the Eleanor's Legacy Foundation, to help adopted children in difficult situations. The foundation offered legal aid, psychological support, and educational grants, everything I had once needed so badly myself. At the same time, I immersed myself in managing the companies Eleanor had left me. I hired a strong team of professionals but attended every meeting myself, delving into every detail to honorably continue the business my grandmother had built. The consequences for my former family were severe. Unable to pay the $1.8 million restitution, Barbara and Richard were forced to sell their house and all their assets. Criminal charges for fraud soon followed. Richard and Barbara received prison sentences. Michael, whose education had also been paid for with part of the trust money, was ordered to repay about $310,000. This financial pressure destroyed his marriage, and rumor has it he now works 2 jobs to pay off the debt. As for Jessica, her public meltdown had far-reaching consequences. Her reputation was ruined, leading to a series of personal and professional failures, a difficult divorce, failed business ventures, and lawsuits for debts. All her attempts to clear her name, whether through a book or a blog, failed. One day, she even wrote me a letter. In it, she appealed to family ties and suggested we meet to build a future together. But her desperate attempt to reconnect was driven not by remorse, but by the hope of financial help. I deleted her message without replying. 6 months after Eleanor's passing, I stood in the new headquarters of our foundation in downtown Boston. I looked at the photos of the children we had already managed to help and thought that Eleanor would be proud of us. At that moment, a message came from Michael. He wrote that Richard and Barbara were having a very hard time and asked me to help, because they are still your parents. I calmly typed a reply, weighing each word. They were not my parents. They were people who took money from my upbringing and instead made me a target for their problems. I owe them nothing. But I will make a donation for the exact amount they took from me, $520,000, to a foundation that helps children from troubled families. I will do it in their name. That will be the only legacy they leave behind. I hit send and blocked his number, feeling that this chapter of my life was finally closed. A year later, I was on the cover of a major business magazine. The article was not about my inheritance, but about my work, the successful management of the companies and the Eleanor's Legacy Foundation, which had helped hundreds of children in that time. My story was mentioned only briefly, as part of the past. Society no longer saw me as the controversial figure from the scandalous headlines. I was not just an heiress, I was Nicole, a person who had overcome hardship and was now helping others.